process of finding great donors is, sometimes there's a lot of confusion about that. Some people think it's about finding rich people. And that certainly can be an important aspect of finding donors. But the primary first step is to see who's already supporting your organization and how they're supporting your organization. And so you look first within. You look first within your existing base of support. That means your board of directors. That means all of your committees. That means people who are working in any capacity as a volunteer in your organization. That also means your staff. And the second thing that I usually do in terms of finding the next rung out is I think about the mission. I think about where we're headed strategically. And I think about people and organizations that, if they're not already supporting our organization, ought to be supporting our organization because they already have an affinity with the mission that we have. I don't just run around willy-nilly, trying to find people or look through boards of directors lists and say, 20 rich people, I don't do that. No one who's a good professional fundraiser does that. But a lot of times boards of directors or new EDs will come in, new executive directors will come in and say, hey, I met a guy at a cocktail party last night and he knows Steve Ballmer who works at Microsoft and whatever it is. And you'll say, that's nice. I don't want to insult you, but I don't want to go fishing for people that have money. I want to first find people that have an affiliation with us and then work through them. A lot of the first work that would be done in any kind of preparation for a campaign would be to work on looking through the donor database and talking with the volunteer leadership around the donor sphere that organization has and who they believe they can attract based on a campaign. One thing that's great about a campaign is it gives you an opportunity to have a really high profile giving opportunity to attract higher gifts from your current donor base and also to attract people that are new. And you do that by leveraging the volunteer support that you already have, by saying, okay, so we're going to find ways to expand our base through the folks that we already know as much as possible. So you might do that through various donor acquisition strategies. You might have people do referrals to friends on your website. You might have gatherings in people's homes in order to have them bring friends. You might have different types of public forums in order to share the work that you're doing with the community, attract an audience that's interested in that topic. You might do strategic leadership recruitment and have convenings of various kinds of leaders around particular policy issues or other kinds of programmatic issues that are of interest to those people. And what emerges is a strong pool for a compelling reason, if you have a compelling reason, of people that are potential givers at levels that you would like them to give. That's how it's done.
When we're looking at an individual donor, we're always wanting to know where they are in their life and trying to figure out, what would be the right connection for them to the organization. Sometimes, clearly, there's not a right connection because their heart is really in the arts, and it just happened that they came to an event because it was a favor for somebody, and you can quickly get to that answer. But at the same time, there's always the exploration that needs to happen with every individual. And even though we may not actively steward an individual, we will always want to keep them in our communication loop so that, if there is something that piques their interest or if there is something that makes sense for them, that there's an opportunity to kind of reconnect with individuals. I think with development, it's really about relationships and really about asking questions and listening to your donors and really listening to your prospects of people that you are interested in working with and doing the research so you understand what their histories are, where they're coming from, and being able to forecast in some cases what they're thinking and where they want to go, and to see whether or not that's a relevant match. But again, it really comes back down to the relationship. If you don't have the ability to connect with them as an individual one-on-one, you'll never have the chance to really understand if we're a good match or not. So we're always constantly working towards building that relationship so that there is an opportunity to deepen our ability to communicate with them one-on-one. And then at that point, when they actually demonstrate that interest, it just continues to grow. It's a very natural evolution. Unfortunately, there isn't a silver bullet. There isn't kind of here's here's this 10 steps that you can take to bringing a donor on board. I think if you're doing a good job in terms of sharing with them about your mission, where you're going, what you're doing, how you're doing it, how you're successful, how you're not successful too, because a lot of people really want to hear, what's not going well, because if everybody's walking around with rose-colored glasses, then there's no problems in the world. But I think there's an honesty in all of that. There's a humble nature to the work that you're doing, and that you're not the person who's just asking for the $10 out of the person's pocket. You're really looking at building a long-term relationship where people are really looking deeply into their personal values and how does it match with your organization. Once you get past all of that, then it's a much more natural conversation. You should never feel like you're putting somebody out by asking them to support your organization. It should feel very natural and part of an evolutionary step.
It's interesting, as a funder now, my husband and I have talked about what separates, or how do groups get to be on our top shelf. And we've been very surprised by some groups that have kind of wiggled themselves there, and we don't know how they did that. But there's one group now where I'm co-chairing their capital campaign. My husband volunteers a lot. We're talk to them 2 or 3 times a week. And I think it's because they treated us like stakeholders. They'll give us a call when a program didn't work or a policy has a problem, or they're hitting some political arenas where they're not sure they did the right thing. So they talked to us about a lot more things than just money. And so then when they did talk to us about money, we realized how many different tentacles we already had into them. And so of course money flowed very naturally. They were part of us. We can refer to them as a we. I feel very engaged. I think about them when I read the news, how it's going to affect them, us, I guess. And we're just surprised how they came to the top, because they weren't one of our traditional top shelf organizations, and it was all about the relationship. So it's interesting now being on the other side and seeing that actually work. It's not a gimmick, and it wasn't a trick. There were many, many authentic conversations about policy and program and development and board and all kinds of things that led to an increased leadership role. And everybody in that organization, volunteers, has a lot of different relationships like that. So it's a nice community. So I think that involves the staff being willing to, they were confident enough they were doing their job well enough that they could talk about when they felt things weren't working well. Or failures weren't personal to them, they were organization policies weren't working, but they were confident enough to bring that up to us and not feel like it would be a punitive or a weakness on their part, and it wasn't.